The bus slammed its brakes just as Maren stepped off, books skittering and a coffee teetering, and she dove, catching the cardboard cup with a breathless laugh that tasted like shock. Her hands trembled more from the day's weight than the near fall. She shoved her keys into her pocket, shoulders tight, and walked the cracked sidewalk toward a house where every step felt like walking over glass. Inside, the house smelled of old lemon polish and disappointment. Elora was at the kitchen table, a letter folded in her fingers like a weapon. "This is from Bridgeton," she said, without looking up. "They caught Jessa cheating. Suspended." Maren's stomach dropped as if she'd been pushed down a flight of stairs. "How?" She started, but Elora's eyes were already on her, like knives. "You always ruin things," Elora said. "You make her jealous, you push her, she follows your example. Do you even try?" Jessa, eating cereal across the table, flicked a spoon through the said air like it might slice the tension. "Maybe if you weren't so bitter, she'd do better," she said, not looking guilty, just bored. Maren's throat went dry. The room shrank to the square of table between them. Memories surfaced, uninvited birthday money blamed on her. Scraped knees blamed on her reckless playing. A summer's savings gone when Elora said it had been used for Jess's emergency. Once, Maren had counted coins for a bus to a summer program. The envelope was gone, and Elora had said she must have spent it. No apology ever came. A rhythm built behind Maren's ribs until words she had swallowed for years pushed out. "I'm not making her cheat," she said, voice small and then sharp. "I didn't teach her to lie. I didn't force her to do anything." Elora's laugh was a dry crack. "You always play victim, Maren. You're jealous of your sister, and you always will be." "That's not true," Maren said. She felt something cold and precise inside her chest that steadied her. "I'm done being blamed for everything. I won't." She stopped, swallowing the rest. She grabbed a duffel bag from her closet, stuffing a few shirts, the only photo of her and her grandmother, and a battered paperback. She found $70 in a shoe, more pennies than safety, and zipped the bag closed. Elora's voice pitched higher, then cruel. "Where do you think you're going? You can't leave us. Family sticks together." Jessa reached for the phone to film, half smile ready. "Make sure you don't take the charger," she said casually. Maren backed out the door with the bag, the house humming with accusations behind her like a bad radio. Outside, the air felt sharper. Maren walked until the city lights blurred, and she found herself at the North Line bus terminal, where fluorescent lamps buzzed and the benches wore people like second skins. She slept with her duffel as a pillow, the photo pressed to her chest because it was the only proof she had, of someone who'd ever believed in her. Night seeped in, and fear kept her awake. What would she do in the morning? Morning hurt. Her phone had no money for a call. She tried day labor agencies, coffee joints, anything. Doors closed politely. "No openings. We'll keep your resume." At the 8th place, a small diner with a bell on the door and steam on the windows, a woman with grease on her apron called out, "We need a dishwasher. You okay with hours?" Maren nodded, the word coming out like a small victory. Darla, the diner's owner, moved with the economy of someone who had worked a lifetime. "We don't pay fancy, but we keep food on the table. Come in tomorrow, 6 a.m., she said. Maren's hands smelled of soap by the end of the first shift. Her legs ached. She learned to tie her apron tight and keep her head down. The work was honest and brutal, and she slept in shifts between shifts on a futon found through a co-worker contact, thankful for the roof. At Bean and Barrel, she waited tables after hours, mopping, carrying trays. Theo, The mellow barista introduced himself with a small smile. He was patient in a way that made her feel less like an accusation. "You're holding," she heard him say once, and it landed like an instruction she hadn't given herself yet. Maren found small rituals that grounded her, sorting candles she'd once made in secret, smoothing the wax with a practiced thumb, inhaling the scent before it cooled. She had made candles as a child with her grandmother, slow afternoons filled with stories and warm wax. She'd stopped after her grandmother died. The memory was private, soft, and suddenly it began to whisper like a light in a window. One night, power flickered at the cafe. Guests lit candles on their tables for the novelty of it. Maren carried a tiny handmade candle to the manager as a joke. The manager held it and squinted. Theo said, "You should sell." Maren laughed. But that night, she sat on her futon and listed a single candle on a marketplace, clumsy with the photos and descriptions. The next morning, there were 3 views. By evening, there was 1 order. Her hands shook when she wrapped the candle in tissue and stamped the box. The first sale felt like a bank account deposit for the heart. She poured more at nights, after shifts, inventory growing on a borrowed shelf. Names came to the shop. Silver Hearth Candles. Each candle she made felt like an apology to herself that she'd been waiting years to give. Success began as small sparks. 1 repeat customer, an appreciative comment from a local blogger, a tiny sidebar on a neighborhood page. Each confirmation built her back in ways money couldn't buy. She kept her head down at work, but inside, a slow heat spread hope. Wary, but real. Then the reviews arrived, sour and sharp. "Moldy wax," one said. "Arrived, melted," another claimed. Orders stalled. Maren checked the feedback with a hand pressed to her mouth, feeling suddenly fragile and exposed. The seller's inbox filled with angry messages. She recognized the profile pictures on some accounts Jess's circle. She called her mother, voice small and pleading, but Alora's response was clipped and distant. The world felt crowded with people trying to take what she'd built. Theo noticed her slump and asked, "What's wrong?" When she told him, his face tightened, not pity, but determination. He filmed a short clip of her pouring wax, pressing a label, hands moving like prayer. He spoke to the camera about resilience, without naming names. "This is Maren. She makes candles by hand. If you can spare a look, it would mean a lot." He posted it on his small account, and within a day, someone with a bigger platform picked it up. The video climbed. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, and a strange momentum took hold. The diner staff rallied. Darla let her take longer, breaks to pack boxes. Her phone bloomed with notifications that felt like sunrise. A boutique messaged for a wholesale sample. A small lifestyle page wanted an interview. Maren's hands, raw from work and late nights, now held envelopes of cash and tags of praise. She laughed and cried in the same 10-minute stretch, dizzy with relief and the memory of a girl who'd slept on a bench not long ago. Success brought new pressures: fulfillment, inventory, quality control, shipping, logistics. She hired a friend to help, converted a corner of the futon room into a workshop with shelving and a small heat lamp. Silverhearth's signature scent, vanilla, cedar, a memory of her grandmother's shawl, became synonymous with small comforts people seemed to crave. Meanwhile, life at the house lurched. Foreclosure notices arrived at the mailbox. Alora's sleep thinned into anxious staring at the ceiling. Jess's college debt, once a rumor, became a hard fact. At a certain point, the calls started hesitant, then clumsy. Elora called like someone testing a cracked bridge for safety. "Maren?" I saw a piece about a shop. I'm so proud. The words were syrupy, familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. Elora's timing was uncanny. Praise when it might get her something. Jessa sent a message that read like a draft apology, heavy on wish and light on accountability. Maren read them with practicality. She had built everything on nights of exhaustion and mornings of grit. She was not built from their approval. Still, a hollow part of her imagined the scene. Returning, a hero with bags of success, and buying the house out of foreclosure. It took her an hour to recognize that the fantasy was a trap disguised as rescue. The call that mattered came one afternoon when Maren was packing an order that smelled of citrus and rain. Elora's number flashed. "Honey, we miss you," Elora said softly. "Family sticks together. You could come home now that things are different." Maren's breath tightened. She remembered the nights she'd slept upright on a bench, the times she was blamed for other people's choices, the warmth that had suffocated her. She pictured the duffel bag, the $70, the photo pressed to her chest. She set the phone down and walked to the window. Orders waited on the table, wax half cool. Theo's voice from the workshop was steady. "Do what's right for you." Maren's fingers brushed the photo on the shelf. She picked up the phone and said, "I'm glad things are better, but I'm not coming back." The silence on the line felt heavy, then a quick inhale from Elora, as if she was collecting manipulation into a single sound. "You don't have to be that way," Elora said. "Family matters more than pride." Maren breathed out, feeling a strange new clarity. "I matter too," she said. She hung up. The weeks that followed were busy and honest. Silver Hearth grew into more than a shelter. It became a craft and a community. People wrote to tell her how a candle had marked a small ritual, a turning point, a quiet divorce night, a small victory, the first morning after grief. Maren answered each message with a kind of tenderness, learning to accept praise and to be proud without flashing the old survival guilt. She didn't buy the old house. She didn't need to. She rented a modest studio with a sun window and a space for the shelves. She paid in cash the first month and felt like each coin had a name. Persistence, patience, sanity. The foreclosure notice delivered in a neighborhood bulletin no longer felt like a personal failure. It felt like an outcome of choices she had been spared by leaving. Months later, she opened a small wholesale account with a company that flooded local shops. A boutique owner wrote, "We want your story in our shop window." Her life wasn't perfect. Supply hiccups, a burned batch, a tax bill, but it was hers. She had traded being wanted by the wrong people for being chosen by strangers who loved what she made. Elora called on holidays, voice smoothed, offering recipes, asking about herbs, as if familiarity could stitch wounds. Jessa sent a message with a picture of a diploma she'd yet to earn, begging for advice on a class she might retake. Maren read the messages and practiced boundaries. When she responded, it was factual, kind, and brief. She had discovered a strange new power. She could love from a distance. On a quiet evening, she closed the shop's big order and sat with a candle lit on the table, the light steady and small. She thought of the bus terminal bench, the $70, the duffel, and laughed softly at the girl who had once believed she was disposable. She was not disposable. She had built a life from the shards. She whispered a thanks to the grandmother in the photo and to the hands that had helped her along the way. There were nights when exhaustion and fear braided together and left Maren hollow. Once, after a 12-hour shift and a late-night pour session, she sat on the curb outside the shop, hands sticky with wax, and let herself cry. The sounds were small and jagged, Not the cinematic sobs in movies, but a private unspooling. A delivery driver paused, offering a bottle of water and a word, "Keep going." He didn't know her story, and that anonymity felt like shelter. Maren swallowed and stood, folding the moment into the long ledger of reasons to keep moving. Darla became a kind of unexpected anchor. She had been divorced twice and opened a diner on grit and stubbornness. "You got grit, kid," she told Maren one slow afternoon while wiping down counters. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. People will take shots when you're up. They'll try to pull you back into where it was safe for them. That doesn't mean it's safe for you." Darla's hands had a map of small calluses. She passed a tip envelope to Maren with a frankness that made Maren want to cry and laugh at. The same time, as silver hearth orders multiplied, Maren learned logistics in real time. She negotiated with a candle wick supplier on a shaky phone call, argued with a carrier about a delayed package, and invented packaging that would survive a hot truck in July. The small studio she rented had a window that looked out over a lane where people walked dogs and argued about apartments. She put a work table under that window and stacked jars and labels like trophies. When a boutique owner asked for samples, Maren stayed up late to handwrite a note that said simply, "Made with care." The sabotage didn't stop quickly. Fake reviewers posted elaborate lies. The wax scratched furniture. A candle exploded. A hand reached into a parcel and found a rock. Maren learned to breathe. She wrote calm, factual replies. "We're so sorry you experienced this. Please DM us so we can refund and investigate." Some reviewers doubled down, calling her boutique dishonest. The first weeks, each new notification felt like a punch. But then the genuine customers, real people who had received candles, posted photos of safe glass, steady flames, and notes about quiet evenings. Those voices multiplied and drowned the lies. Theo became more than a co-worker. He was a partner in craft and survival. He took on shipping one month when Maren's hands blistered, and he learned to center wicks and tie ribbon like he'd known it his whole life. Their conversations were practical inventory counts, scent mixing ratios, but they were also small therapy. "When my dad left," Theo said once while stirring coffee, "I learned that sometimes people can't give you what they don't have. You didn't take anything from them by leaving." The sentence lodged in Maren like a stone, finding steady water around it. One night, a woman with a tired face and a stroller came into the boutique where Maren had finally secured a small shelf. She picked up a tin and sniffed, then placed it against her chest as if testing it against a pulse. "My daughter is 2 and she hates sleeping. This helps, the way it's calm," she said. Her voice had a private shake, and she left a note in the shop book. "Bought this for our first night alone after court. Thank you." Maren sat on a crate and cried, the tears this time tasting like gratitude more than grief. Money taught its own lessons. When a tax notice arrived, she had to call an accountant and ask what it meant to be a small business owner. She set aside emergency funds, learned to invoice properly, and argued with a supplier about a bulk discount. Practical competence became a quiet source of pride. She hired a young student to help with packaging and paid them in cash and in mentoring, showing them how to center a wick, how to fold a note into a parcel so it felt like a hand-delivered letter. Her relationship with Jessa altered in small, brittle ways. A message came asking for a favor, a reference for a job, reapplication, and Maren wrote a short, professional note and sent it. Jessa responded with an awkward, "Thanks," and Maren felt the old reflex to make herself smaller. She resisted. She had learned to set boundaries not because she wanted to punish them, but because she needed to be steady for the people who believed in her and for herself. When Alora showed up once at the shop in person late afternoon, hair pulled back, Face somehow contrite, Maren's chest went tight. "I thought maybe we could talk," Alora said. It was polite. It was calculating. Maren had rehearsed 1,000 responses and answered simply, "I am glad you're doing better. This is my work time." Alora lingered by a shelf, pretending to read labels. Customers greeted her, and she smiled with an ease that felt learned. After an hour, she left with a bag of candles and a glossy apology that wanted something in return. The scaling of Silver Hearth introduced questions Maren hadn't considered in the cold focus of survival. Did she want investors? Would wholesale deals require changing her scents? Could she keep the integrity of a thing when it became someone else's commodity? She navigated these waters with a cautious heart. She declined an offer that wanted to replace her grandmother's signature scent with something trendier. "No," she said gently, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Community kept appearing in small gestures. A teacher who'd bought a candle for the classroom showed up with a volunteer weekend crew to help Maren paint her studio shelves. A supplier offered discounted packing peanuts after hearing her story. People who had no obligation to care did small things that added up. Maren learned how to receive help without feeling it as a debt. She paid it forward when she could. Teaching a candle-making class at a local shelter one Saturday morning, there were moments of doubt sharp as winter wind. Once, when an order was delayed and a boutique snarled with frustration, Maren imagined how easy it would have been to return to the safety of the old house's rhythms, to let guilt drown out the small, terrifying freedom she'd built. Instead, she called a friend and confessed the thought. The friend laughed and said, "You're allowed to be scared and still keep what you made." That sentence landed among her priorities, like a gift. By the time the foreclosure notice was final and the bank sign went up on their lawn, Maren had learned to watch from a distance without collapsing into triumphalism. She felt a complicated knot of emotions: sadness that a family fractured, relief that the house no longer held her, a steadier feeling that life was moving as life does. She sent a check anonymously to settle a utility bill when she learned the house's heat had been cut. She did it quietly because she could, not because she wanted gratitude or leverage. On the night she closed her biggest wholesale shipment yet, she stood in the doorway of her studio, hands full of boxes, and tasted the ache and the sweetness of risk. She had a voicemail from Alora that morning, 3 sentences, oddly gentle. Maren listened to it, with the same calm she used to answer supply calls. She deleted it. She had the right to choose which sounds would shape her nights. In the final image, Maren stood at her window as dawn threaded pale light over the lane. A candle burned on her table in a jar stamped with her logo. She watched a father walk his child past the studio, the child pointing at the light like it might be a star. Maren placed another candle into a box, sealed it, and wrote the shipping label by hand. Then she sat, closed her eyes, and breathed. The future felt vast and possible, and she had the steady knowing that she would meet it on her own terms. If this story moved you, if you felt the pinch of unfairness and the warmth of a small victory, please consider subscribing for more stories like Maren's. If something in her journey reminded you of your own or of someone you love, leave a comment below. Your words matter. And if you want to help another maker, hit like so these stories find more eyes and more hearts. Outside, the city slept around the river, lights trailing like slow ships. Maren blew out the candle and smiled in the dark. Morning would bring more work, more orders, more decisions, but for the first time, she faced them with the steadiness of someone who had been tested and chosen herself. She turned off the lamp, folded a sheet of shipping labels, and went to bed knowing she would wake up to a life she had made, not one someone else had given her. Maren walked into the morning and into her work with a steady gait. The duffel and $70 felt far away, not because they were irrelevant, but because they had become tokens of proof. It was proof that leaving was possible, that choosing herself had a consequence of space and breath. She no longer flinched at a raised voice. She breathed through the old reflexes and answered with facts. Times, invoices, shipment, numbers, small unromantic things that held a life together. Customers began sending messages that read like confessions. "This candle helped me sleep the night after I left," one wrote. "My mother and I are trying again, but this is the first night I felt safe," another said. Those notes piled up into a new kind of family, made of strangers who would never sit at her childhood table. They offered solidarity rather than judgment. She learned to separate kindness from obligation. When Elora called offering an invite to dinner, Maren would think of the storms that followed their meals, the way generosity had always wanted something back. She said no to guilt and yes to being present on her own terms. Once, when a neighbor complained about late-night packaging, she apologized and changed the routine. She was not cruel to practical needs, only to manipulative demands. The small studio bloomed. Maren hung a string of postcards from customers and a photo of her grandmother with a penciled note. Made by Maren, who learned to keep the flame. She wrote scent names that felt like sentences the grandmother might have said. Quiet Morning, Maple Story, Grandmother's Visit, and each label became a small story of comfort. When a review appeared accusing Silver Hearth of being a scam, Maren responded with calm documentation. Photos of production, receipts, proof of shipments. The reviewer vanished after the public pushback of customers who had bought and loved the candles. The viral moment that had rescued her shop later became a tool she used intentionally. For honest promotion, for teaching workshops, for hosting nights where people could come and make a candle while they talked about their lives. The public attention brought offers, a pop-up in a bigger market, a collaboration with a small aromatherapy brand, an invitation to curate a seasonal box from Attention C regional magazine. She chose slowly, saying yes only when the partners matched her standards. She refused a deal that wanted to replace her signature scent with something flashy, unwilling to let the essence of her craft be diluted for short-term gain. Theo stayed a constant. He learned how to wrap a box so the recipient felt hugged, how to list inventory so Maren wouldn't have to chase missing jars, how to calm the shop during a stressed call. He didn't ask for ownership. He asked only when a weekend shift needed covering. His loyalty was practical and unperformative. They celebrated quiet victories together, first full month with profit, first wholesale reorder, the day the studio roof stayed dry during a storm because they'd saved for a repair. There was a time when Maren nearly quit. After a particularly vicious week of fake reviews and one burnt batch that smelled awful and ruined an entire day's work, she sat on the futon and considered returning to the house. The idea was like a lure, warm and old. She called Darla, who said what she always said, "You got grit, kid, keep it." Then she called Theo, who reminded her of the woman with the stroller and the bedtime note. Memory stacked in favor of staying. She packed an extra shift and rewired the schedule. A local boutique began a small window display featuring Silver Hearth's tins. The owner hung a card with Maren's short story written on it, how she had left with $70 in a photo and made something that helped people find a small ritual in the dark. People paused at the window, read the card, went in, and bought a candle. One woman lingered, then returned with her sister. They bought 3 candles for their mother who was in a hospital bed. They wanted her room to smell like hope. Maren practiced holding boundaries like a muscle. When Jessa asked for help with a cover letter, Maren wrote a concise but honest note and kept her emotions out of it. There was no warming to old patterns. Instead, she offered help in terms that preserved her peace. Editing resumes, suggesting classes, sending links. When Jessa accepted the offers without apology, Maren felt a strange mixture relief for progress, sorrow for the cost of learning it from a distance. People who had once been invisible to her became luminous. The delivery driver who'd given her a bottle of water came by with a tip jar he'd collected from friends. For the woman who poured light, he said. A teacher who had used her candles in the classroom invited Maren to lead a workshop on ritual and self-care. The classes were small, intimate, and she watched strangers slow down as they poured wax and pressed wicks. They spoke of grief and breakups, of quiet wins, and the room smelled of warm things and possibility. There were practical victories too. She learned how to set up a simple ledger, how to estimate a wholesale price without underselling herself, how to ask for payment up front when a client had a history of delays. Each new skill felt like a small fortification. The life she built required competence and courage in equal measure. Once, Alora showed up to the studio with a small bouquet of daisies and an apology that tasted of rehearsed lines. "I misstepped, honey," she said, looking like someone who'd been practicing softness. Maren accepted the flowers politely and answered with short, clear sentences. She said she forgave when she felt it, and that forgiveness did not mean returning to the old system of blame. Alora nodded, and for a moment, an imagined reconciliation shimmered. It never arrived fully. Alora's apologies often sought to close a debt rather than repair a breach. When the foreclosure sign finally sat on the lawn of her old home, Maren felt only a complex sorrow for the end of the space their lives had occupied, relief that she had chosen herself. She paid attention to practical matters but did not gloat. She left a small, anonymous payment for the final utility bill because someone had told her the house's heat had been cut and she did not want anyone to shiver on her account. She could be gentle without being pulled back. On a late afternoon, packing boxes as a storm rolled in, Maren paused and touched the photo of her grandmother propped on the shelf. The hands that had first taught her to press wick and pour wax were gone, but their lessons lived in how she moved. Careful, patient, exact. She had left a house where she had been unwanted and built a life where people chose her work. That choice was not a vindication of anger but a quiet testament to a different kind of love, the one she could give herself. If this story touched you, if you felt the pull of old wounds and the warmth of slow repair, consider subscribing for more stories like Maren's. Comment with someone you think of when you hear her journey. Sometimes our comments help others feel less alone. If you liked the story and want others to find it, hit like and share. Maren blew out the candle on her table, sealed a last parcel, and went to bed knowing the morning would bring more work, yes, but also the steady presence of a life she had chosen. She had stepped away from being wanted by the wrong people and had become wanted by the right ones, by people who bought her candles because they needed light, by strangers who left notes, by friends who stayed. In the quiet before sleep, she felt less afraid than she had in years. The future was a stretch of streets and windows, and she would meet each one on her own terms. Maren woke before the alarm. The room dim with early sunlight stretching across the floor like soft ribbons. She lay still for a moment, listening to the hum of her small fridge. The way silence felt safe now, instead of suffocating. For years, waking up meant bracing for accusation. Now, it meant choices, work, growth, her own life. She sat up, stretched her arms, and smiled at the boxes stacked neatly beside the work table. She had packed late the night before, wrapping jars with muscle memory and care. Each order felt like sending out a message. You're not alone. You're not broken. You can make something beautiful from the pieces. She lit a small candle. It was habit now, a grounding ritual before the day began. The flame danced, warm and steady. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. Keep going. Her phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She answered, voice light. Hello? Good morning, a woman said cheerfully. This is Renee from River and Embaco. I emailed you yesterday? We'd like to discuss a seasonal collaboration. Maren's heartbeat jumped. River and Embaco. Wasn't small, she'd admired their curated boxes for years. Yes, she managed. I would love to talk about it. Perfect, Renee said. Your work speaks for itself. We think your quiet morning scent would make a beautiful autumn feature. Are you available for a call this week? Yes, absolutely. Great. We'll be in touch. The call ended, leaving Maren standing still, hand over her chest like she was holding her heart in place. She laughed, half joy, half disbelief, and spun once in the middle of her tiny studio. She grabbed her phone and texted, Theo, you're not going to believe this. Call me when you're free. He replied seconds later, What happened? Did we win the lottery? Better, she wrote. Collaboration offer. No way. Way. She could almost hear him cheering from his apartment 2 buildings away. She got ready, tying her hair up, pulling on a clean shirt that smelled faintly of cedar from the shelves. She ate a yogurt standing up, checking messages and printing labels. When she opened her shop's Instagram, she froze. Notifications were exploding. A lifestyle influencer with nearly 500,000 followers had reposted one of Theo's videos. She had written, Support small makers. Found this incredible shop last night and I'm obsessed. Maren covered her mouth with both hands, her inbox filled with order confirmations. She watched in real time as her shop's analytics spiked like a heartbeat, finding its rhythm after a long, flat line. More orders meant more work, but instead of fear, she felt excitement, a good kind of pressure. She didn't even notice the tears until one fell onto her wrist. Her phone rang again, Theo this time. Okay, how are you not screaming right now? He said before she could speak. I did scream, Maren laughed. Quietly, like into my pillow. This is huge! You're going to need help, aren't you? I think so. I get off at 4. I'm coming over. We'll make an assembly line. She felt warmth rise inside her, a gentle bloom. Thank you, really. Don't thank me, he said. You made this. I just clapped loudly. After the call, she went to work. She poured wax with precision, mixed scents with attention, wiped jars carefully. Noon sunlight crossed the window, warming her shoulders. She had no idea her day was about to take another turn, one she wasn't prepared for. Around 2 p.m., the bell above the studio door chimed. She glanced up and nearly dropped the jar in her hand. Elora stood there, hair pinned neatly, makeup done, clothes nicer than the last time Maren had seen her. She clutched a handbag like it might shield her. It was the first time Elora had come inside the studio without warning, without a reason manufactured from guilt. Maren's breath hitched. A beat of silence stretched, thin and trembling. Hi, honey, Elora said softly. The voice, sweet, small, did not match the years behind it. Hi, Maren said cautiously. I was in the area, Elora lied. Thought I'd stop by. Maren wiped her hands on her apron. I'm busy right now. Lots of orders. Yes. Elora glanced around, eyes lingering on the shelves. I can see that. You've done well. Maren waited, steady but guarded. Elora always came with a purpose, always. I brought something, Elora said, reaching into her bag. She placed a small box on the table, a pastry from the bakery near their old house, one Maren used to love as a kid. Thought you might want this. Maren didn't move to take it. Alora's smile strained. You don't have to look at me like that. I'm trying. Maren took a quiet breath. Trying? For what, exactly? To fix things. Alora swallowed. To fix us. Maren's lips parted. That was new, but the ache inside her said, Be careful. Why now? Maren asked. Alora's eyes darted to the shelves again. The jars. The success. A beat of silence answered, before her words did. Because, she finally whispered, you're doing well now. You have stability. Maybe we can build something again. As a family. There it was, the real reason, the one she knew was coming. Alora stepped closer. You could move back home, help with the mortgage, help your sister. We could fix things together. I know you make enough now. Maren closed her eyes. The duffel bag, the $70, the nights on the bench. All of it flashed through her mind like a film she couldn't pause. No, she said gently. Alora stiffened. No? No, Maren repeated. I'm not your solution, and I'm not going back. Her mother blinked, stunned not by the words, but by the strength in them. You're not wanted here, Alora said, voice cracking with old patterns resurfacing. That's what you think? That's what you believe? That's what you told me, Maren corrected. Over and over. You and Jessa both. And I believed it for years, but I don't anymore. Alora's jaw trembled. We need you. Maren nodded slowly. I know, but I don't need you the way I used to, and that's okay. Her mother's breath hitched, a wounded sound. Then came the tears, messy, panicked. After everything I did for you, you did what you thought was right, Maren said softly. But it hurt me, and I can't go back to that. Alora stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. You're different, she whispered. Yes, Maren said. That was the point. Silence hung, thick and final. After a moment, Alora wiped her eyes, grabbed her handbag, and turned away. I hope, she said at the door, voice quivering, you don't regret this. Maren felt the old guilt try to creep in like a shadow. She stepped toward the door and replied with a gentleness that was firm and true. I already regretted staying. Leaving saved me. Alora froze, then left without another word. The bell chimed behind her, and the studio felt larger, lighter, like space had returned where suffocation once lived. Maren stood in the quiet, letting the weight move through her. Not grief, closure. Her phone buzzed on the table. Theo, be there in 10. Bring snacks. She smiled, wiped her face, and wrote, Good. We've got a lot to do. As she turned to her work table, the pastries Alora left remained untouched. She'd decide later what to do with them. For now, she had orders to pack life, to build peace, to protect. Evening fell, and the studio hummed with activity. Theo arrived, then 2 neighbors offered to help pack when they heard about the viral post. Boxes stacked. Tape rolls hissed. Laughter mingled with the smell of warm wax. At some point, Theo nudged her. You okay? Maren nodded. Yeah, I've never been better. Good, he said softly. You deserve that. They worked until midnight. When the last package was sealed, the last label printed, they all stood in the middle of the studio, exhausted but happy. Someone said, You're meant for this, Maren. Another said, This is just the beginning. Maren believed them. She walked them out, locked the door, and sunk into a chair, staring at the dark, soft glow of the candle burning on her shelf. The flame was steady, quiet, hers, she whispered to herself, with the voice of someone who finally understood her worth. I chose my own life, and it's enough. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful narratives like Maren's, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about the part that touched you the most, and like this video to help more people find healing stories like this one. Your support means everything. Maren blew out the last candle, the smoke curling upward like a promise. A new day waited. A new life she built from scratch. And she would meet it with courage, because for the first time, she truly knew she was wanted here, in her own life, by herself,